It's not personal, Sonny. It's strictly business.
This video naturally contains spoilers for The Godfather Part 1, often regarded as one of the finest films in cinema history, and it is easy to see why. There are so many scenes worth an in-depth breakdown in and of themselves throughout the 3-hour, faintly Shakespearean tragedy that plays out before our eyes. Because I think it is a tragedy, more obviously so with the following films, but even here we see not exactly the destruction of a man's soul, but at least a man boxing himself into a corner, faced with social pressures, making certain pivotal decisions that there is ultimately no coming back from. But I'm going to start this video with something I found both interesting and strange, which is what happens around Apollonia's death. For context, following his murder of Sollozzo and the police captain McCluskey, which we'll come to later, Michael Corleone is forced to hide away in Sicily until such a time his safety is secured and he can come home. While he's there, strolling around the beautiful countryside with 2 bodyguards, he meets Apollonia and is struck effectively with love at first sight. They marry, they joke around as he tries teaching her to drive.
Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Wednesday.
Then she dies in a car bomb meant for him. What's both strange and interesting about this moment, however, is that the film's protagonist just saw his wife murdered. An incredibly painful and traumatic event, and yet the camera never cuts back to Michael's reaction at any point. It just lingers on the car, then fades to black, then it's the next scene. Vito with the other families. We're denied not only any emotional moment with Michael here, but any moment at all to so much as register a reaction. And then it's never even mentioned again in this film, unless I've missed it. Apollonia isn't so much as alluded to, which is a brilliant way to emphasise Michael's emotional response to the trauma in itself, to shut down completely. Michael is a character who has been fairly calculated and cold throughout this film, but from now on he's markedly more so. His next scene is at least a year on from Apollonia's death.
I've been back a year. Longer than that, I think.
In which he attempts to convince Kay to marry him, only he shows virtually no emotion whatsoever in any of it.
Kay, I need you. And I love you.
He says without even waiting or looking for a response, but turning away to look to the car, which in itself is nice body language to indicate his priorities aren't her, but more generally indicates a lack of feeling from him. The plan for this video is to talk about some of the psychology behind Michael Corleone in his first film. I might allude to the second film in places, but nothing of great detail because I haven't yet rewatched it and therefore my memory is hazy. And also I want to save that for a video on that film itself, but nonetheless, Michael's evolution, his stark contrast to Vito, but also his brothers, and how, as I've suggested, he boxes himself into a corner. Let's start though back at the beginning of the film. Michael begins The Godfather very resistant to the rest of the family, even in the physical sense where at his sister's wedding there is this business going on inside the house in a very quiet and shaded room. There is the celebration of the family at large happening outside the house in a sunny space with music and dancing and cheering. Then Michael positioned in a space between the two, half in the sun, half in the shade, not involved in the business, nor is he enjoying the festivities with his relatives besides a quick hug with Tom and a drunk Fredo stumbling over. Perhaps most clear of all is Michael's appearance, in soldier uniform where the rest of his family wear suits, or refusing to be involved in a family picture unless he can pull his American, non-Italian and quite modern girlfriend into the photo. This is a man who, rather than getting involved in the family business of organised crime like his 2 older brothers, broke away first with college, then with enlisting into the army. He has no desire to be part of their world and describes the family business to Kay not with sugarcoating to make it sound palatable, but deliberately graphic in order to emphasise its morality.
And my father assured him that either his brains or his signature would be on the contract. That's my family, Kay. It's not me.
We have the sense, not just that being the youngest child, Michael was afforded more freedom away from the family business, whereas Sonny, the firstborn, felt a sense of responsibility that probably provided an outlet for his rage. And Fredo arguably lacked the brains, or at least the drive, to find anything else other than what was put in front of him, where instead the younger siblings often do tend to feel more freedom. However, not just he is afforded it, but he seems to want it, and I think picking a modern American girlfriend from college with independent aspirations of her own, later becoming a teacher, emphasises this. Michael's family staunchly think of themselves as Sicilians with a traditional Italian outlook. Michael thinks of himself as American.
I'm a stranger in this country. I'm an American, hiding in Sicily.
And in terms of enlisting in the army, we've got to remember there's no financial need for Michael to enlist due to his family's wealth, and due to his family contacts, there's no chance of him being drafted. It was a conscious decision he made himself, most likely born out of ideals for choosing to defend a country he clearly feels a sense of duty and pride towards.
They're saps because they risk their lives for strangers.
Risk their lives for their country.
Your country ain't your blood, you remember that.
I don't feel that way.
So we've got someone who is probably both partly rebelling against his family, as we often do when we're young, trying to explore parts of our identity that aren't all the same as our parents. I think that motivation does have some relevance, especially when you're the younger sibling. Arguably, there's then either a drive to compete with your older brothers so you don't have to always feel like the baby one, which I guess he does in the end by becoming the Don, but there's that, or perhaps a different drive to break away from the competition altogether, void himself from the sibling rivalry by taking an entirely different path and arguably a moral high ground. That's a small point, it's possibly conjecture, but it's worth me throwing it out there. Let's think about the morality though. His family's business thrives and maintains its power on the idea that American society and its values aren't necessarily ones worth defending. The opening to this film is Bonacera, an undertaker whose daughter was brutally assaulted. He went to the police and was given no justice at all.
Suspended the sentence. They went free that very day. I stood in the courtroom like a fool.
So he instead goes to Don Corleone to dispense a justice or vengeance of another kind. Vito is insulted that Bonacera went to the police, however.
Why did you go to the police? Why didn't you come to me first?
In this sense, Vito has some influence stemming from the idea that society itself isn't just, that governments and police can't be trusted and can be corrupt. Therefore, organised crime, while not good, seems suddenly less immoral and almost acceptable or excusable to the public in many ways.
I believe in America.
As Vito himself later explains, people can turn a blind eye to his gambling business,
Which they regard as a harmless vice.
and we can totally understand why someone in Bonacera's grief-stricken state might feel tempted to turn to Don Corleone. For those lacking faith in the American society of the time itself, Vito Corleone comes as an alternative, one you could almost make excuses for. Michael then, college-educated, modern American soldier in the army, seems to present an opposition to his father's way of living, which, yeah, seems tenuous, but I think becomes meaningful when we get to seeing his father, Vito, in hospital after an assassination attempt. Michael goes to visit him to the discovery all the guards meant to keep Vito safe have been removed. The place is deserted. Suddenly here, a lot of these values lose their strength. Suddenly, fighting overseas in a war to defend his country seems diminished when he can't even defend his father. When there's a war happening more locally between the different Dons. I suspect there is some, perhaps unfair, but small sense of guilt there. You know, I've been a civilian resisting all this conflict. It's only by sheer luck of me stopping by the hospital and discovering all the guards are gone that I'm able to save my father's life. And Michael shows his intelligence and bravery, perhaps strengthened from his time in the army, to move Vito to a different room and employ the help of civilian Enzo to scare off the assassins.
Put your hand in your pocket like you have a gun.
If
be all right.
But it's only been by sheer luck he was able to save his father's life this time. Does this mean in not keeping a close eye on things, not being there in the business to help protect his family, does that mean he's putting them at risk? There has been a war going on with people trying to kill his family and his loved ones. To keep out of that war altogether and not help them, of course he'd feel guilt. So protecting his loved ones, whatever he might feel about the morality of the business, it brings into focus that he respects and loves his father, and so as he stands guard in the hospital room offering comfort, he says,
I'm with you now.
and the point about upholding the values of society. Suddenly, Michael's feelings change when he's confronted with a very corrupt police captain who has been paid to remove the guards around Vito's door in order that the assassins can get to him. A corrupt police captain who will beat up and arrest Michael for pointing it out. The event brings into question what was he fighting overseas for? Defending a society that now appears broken and corrupt and can't be trusted to keep his own family safe? Suddenly, Michael's faith in America is wavering. Suddenly, the kind of justice Vito's business offers seems a little more understandable, to which Michael later comes to the conclusion,
My father's no different than any other powerful man. Any man who's responsible for other people. Like a senator or a president.
and when Kay suggests that senators and presidents don't have men killed, he responds,
Who's being naive, Kay?
it's hard to argue he doesn't have a point. Even if it is a typically thin excuse to try and shirk his inner guilt and excuse his crimes, we can see how, in one simple moment, Michael's perspective completely flips. Suddenly he's not resisting his father's way. Resisting it was what meant Michael was never there to protect his father, to care for him or his loved ones when he's needed, to even find out about the assassination attempts until the newspapers. Suddenly, instead, he's trying to live up to his father. He makes a decision that proves his commitment to the family above all else. A decision there is no turning back from. He will kill Sollozzo, the man responsible for the assassination attempt, and the police captain McCluskey. So, to talk of his decision to kill them, yes, it proves his commitment, it serves to help protect his father. It also, as much as Michael says it's not personal, probably does fulfill a sense of vengeance towards McCluskey, not just because he hit him, but because a police captain may possibly represent some of the social values Michael previously strongly believed in. And if that's true, McCluskey's clear corruption here would feel like a personal betrayal. Perhaps I'm wrong there, and perhaps I'm also wrong about this point, which is that there's probably a level of adrenaline and thrill that comes from being involved in this home war. Probably in a way that taps into experiences and adrenaline he would have felt at points during the army. Not to say it isn't also incredibly traumatic, but still. And B, all of it provides a chance for Michael to feel more power within himself. I don't think it's any coincidence Michael as a character first comes alive in this film in the hospital scene. Showing his quick thinking and intelligence to protect his father is what makes him really first stand out to us as an audience. This is why we come to respect him, and when he then proposes the plan to kill Sollozzo and McCluskey himself, we get this wonderful shot where Michael sitting in an ordinary chair, just one small voice among a family of standing people, changes. The slow zoom removes everyone else from the shot and emphasises the presence and aura he has. How perfectly calm and in control he appears in that chair. What was just a man in a room among others becomes a shot very similar to Vito in his chair at the beginning of the film. Regardless of morality, the family business affords him an outlet for all his intelligence, cunning, bravery, nerve, and a heightened sense of power that comes from that. I think another fitting moment is Clemenza running through the plan with Michael.
All right, you shot them both. Now what do you do?
Sit down, finish my dinner.
Come on, kid. Don't fool around.
Obviously, that's not something Michael actually does in the situation, but I think it hints to this side of him that desires that feeling of power and total control, and the drug-like intoxication that kind of power will later give him. So Michael shoots McCluskey and Sollozzo, and now there is no going back. He is mixed up in the business now, whether he likes it or not, because his family's enemies will no longer see him as a civilian. He can no longer go about shopping or seeing plays with Kay because his enemies would gun him down in retaliation. He has served to help protect his family, and now they must do the same for him by hiding him away in Sicily until it's safe to return, his father's birthplace and his family's origin. I think this segment is incredibly clever because it arguably does two very opposite things at the same time. The first is present us with beautiful, almost dreamlike shots of Sicily, where Michael can go strolling about wherever he likes. Similar to how he would stroll about New York with Kay, visiting the theatre, here falling in love and marrying Apollonia in this very dreamlike pocket of happiness and innocence that is then punctured again by the reality of Apollonia's death at the hands of a bomb meant for Michael. It's a very brutal reminder that that old possibility of a simpler life no longer exists for Michael, except in a dream that abruptly ends. And at the same time, this beautiful dreamlike Sicily also appears the complete reverse. Outdated, deserted, barren.
Non so i mascoli. Sono morti tutti per vendetta.
Quite simply a place without all modern luxury and vibrancy he's used to growing up in New York. Which brings into focus exactly what his father has done for him. Immoral, maybe, but without all his father's work carving out their life in America, Michael would have grown up here. Probably poor, or possibly not even existing at all. The freedom Michael did have to go to college and date Kay and everything else was given to him because of his father's work. And so Sicily, A, makes clear to Michael that other avenues in his life have now been closed, and B, instills a newfound respect for Vito and the family business. Suddenly Vito appears very caring in everything he's done. And so perhaps his father is no different to a senator or a president, a man
Responsible for other people.
a man that both protects and cares for his family. It's very fitting that this is how Michael interprets his father's work, especially when you can consider he could have seen the complete opposite, that what his father's work offers is endless turmoil and war and vendettas that left his hometown deserted. War that cost him his brother Sonny and his wife Apollonia. But no, instead the Godfather protects and cares. Part of Michael's journey to become the Don is about securing his family's safety. We don't know what Michael's experience was in the war, but in terms of the idea of protecting those close to you, in this film he is able to successfully protect his father, but then not his wife, and though it's not his fault, not Sonny either. I think it scars Michael and turns him even colder across the rest of this film, yes, but it also arguably evokes some level of obsession for power as a means to securing safety, an idea that will continue in the second film.
I don't feel I have to wipe everybody out, Tom. Just my enemies. That's all.
He's left arguably on a path of increasing power and distrust. The fact we see no anger or upset for these two losses is exactly what makes it so dangerous, because it becomes an underlying, unrelenting, icy obsession, where power and safety, which sometimes but not always go hand in hand, now become synonymous for Michael. Life, naturally uncontrollable in many circumstances, now has to be entirely and absolutely controlled, otherwise there is no safety and all is full of danger. He feels that similar deaths, similar experiences of loss could occur again. Michael then feels he needs total power in a way his father never did, because his dad wasn't so obsessed, nor did he seek absolute power over his enemies. He sought instead to broker peace. Upon hearing the death of Sonny, he says,
I want no acts of vengeance. This war stops now.
And as I say, sometimes power and safety do go hand in hand. Killing the heads of the other 5 families is arguably a smart move at that point in time, kind of advised by Vito. But there will be more death to come in the second film, and even here we end with the killing of Carlo, husband to Michael's sister Connie. A glimpse at the death and destruction that will only get worse. The unprocessed pain of the losses he has already suffered sends him into a state of relentlessly seeking more and more domination to secure an environment in which everything can be controlled, where such losses cannot be sprung upon him, forgetting perhaps that in seeking such domination he creates the enemies himself, that things come full circle and he ends up causing the very deaths that he first sought to prevent. This is where Michael is a total opposite to his father, because Vito Corleone, though ruthless when he felt he needed to be, was never cold. Our introduction to him, whilst intimidating and shady, also has a happy wedding of close relatives and friends going on just outside his window. A wedding he keeps breaking up his business to go and attend, dance with his wife or daughter, or take a family photo. Whilst he and his business are very strictly separated away from his family as two distinct entities, that family is still nonetheless very close by. Throughout the film, he keeps his home filled with relatives, children, guests, all helping to create a warm and welcome atmosphere despite the shady office. This whole wedding scene is almost 30 minutes of the runtime, and I think that's important to really help us feel this sense of warmth and community. As Vito himself suggests,
A man who doesn't spend time with his family can never be a real man.
and it is a statement he seems to believe with great conviction. As much as Michael enlisting in the army was not a wish of his, he still cares for him greatly and won't take the family photo without him.
We're not taking the picture without Michael.
He took in Tom Hagen as a son of his own and provides comfort to him even in the grief of losing Sonny. When singer Johnny Fontaine comes all the way from California for the wedding, Vito is happily observing through the window.
Came all the way from California to come to the wedding. I told you he was going to come.
It's been 2 years. He's probably in trouble again.
He's a good guy.
Which is an interesting exchange because technically Tom is right. Johnny Fontaine is in trouble again and comes down to ask Vito for help. However, Vito doesn't see this at all cynically. He is warm at the idea of Johnny visiting his daughter's wedding, regardless of him wanting help or not. It's a great moment because I think it highlights that Vito isn't just expecting respect and power or safety from those around him, but there's a genuine affection too. Vito eagerly comes out of the office to greet him. Obviously, he is still a criminal who does order killings, and he does need to keep the truth of his business separate enough that his wife can turn a blind eye. Some of that affection does depend on not asking too many questions, but nonetheless, Vito is a man loved by those around him. Not just his literal family, but his business one too. Luca Brasi is genuinely touched that Vito invited him to his daughter's wedding. So much so he insists on thanking Vito even when Vito doesn't feel it's necessary to.
Is this necessary?
And he's a man you sense does place family first. That the whole point of his business was to carve out a life for them. He literally puts his family first in brokering peace, giving in to the drugs business despite being against it because he's lost his son and doesn't want to lose another one in vendettas. Arguably he's playing the long game there, yes, but still, he puts family over business, whereas Michael seems the reverse. Business over family. Most fittingly is this long and touching scene of Vito playing with his grandson Anthony. Out of his suit, Vito becomes an ordinary, loving old man, where, by contrast, there is no similar touching scene between Anthony and Michael, despite the fact Anthony is Michael's son. And also, just to chuck it in, fruit symbolism around Vito. He's out in the market buying it himself and finding enjoyment in simple fruit, and he cuts up an orange to make fangs with Anthony. Arguably the fruit serves as death omens for Vito, but I think it also highlights a warm side to him, one that does enjoy simple fruits. That's a tangent though. I guess to try and tie it all together, we can say Michael is firstly a man caught in a lot of social pressures. Rebellious and resistant and free as he might appear to begin with, he cannot help but be pulled into the business. Not because any of his family expect it, nor does his father even want it.
I never wanted this for you.
But because they come to need his help through the sheer chance he's civilian enough that Sollozzo would trust their meeting with him, and that he is capable enough with a gun to murder his enemies. From that point on, he's as much a murderer as anyone else in the family, and there's no running away from it. The loss of Apollonia and Sonny, as well as the near assassination of his father, perhaps contributes to an increasingly obsessive need for control and safety that turns him cold and paranoid, and not so much a leader to unite people as a leader to thin them down. And it's hard to say whether or not Michael ever loved Kay, something I haven't talked about much here actually. Arguably the whole relationship may have originally been built on his desire to resist and rebel against the family. If he did love her, he doesn't when he later goes back to her. I think she then serves as someone practical to raise children, but also probably serves to justify how he's changed. Kay, I think, partly represents the younger, more moral man Michael used to be. I think keeping her around would serve to convince himself that he is still that at heart, even when he's not. Kay isn't the traditional Italian wife that knows not to ask questions. She represents a modern world in conflict with Michael's profession that leads ultimately to her being shut out and suppressed. Michael is not his father Vito that could conduct business in the shade and then step out into the sunlight to see his wife afterwards. Michael ends the film entirely in the shade, which is what's so perfect about splicing shots of the Fire family killings in with the baptism. It shows there is no separation within Michael between family and business. And when I say he boxed himself into a corner, I mean it was his decision to murder Sollozzo and McCluskey. His idea, his action, knowing the consequences. From there on out he has no other means forwards than to become the Don, because he's too involved already to live safely outside of the business, and he's the only possible leader capable of maintaining that business well enough to keep those within it safe. Perhaps you can argue that does make this a classic Greek tragedy of a man unable to escape fate, which here is modernised to be seen not as some divine presence, but fate in the sense of the family and society and social pressures we grew up within. Arguably, yes, Michael was always destined to sell his soul for power and security, tempted by the business put before him and sent obsessive by traumas he fundamentally failed or even tried to process. But I just don't really like that idea. It's why I think this shot of Michael is so crucial. It shows us very early on that there is some desire for power within himself beyond just the idea of protecting loved ones or doing what is necessary for them, but the side of him that wants to feel grand. In this moment we see it ridiculed by his family. Michael is the youngest, the smart college boy who doesn't know about the business and shouldn't be taken seriously.
What are you gonna do? Nice college boy, huh?
He then goes on to prove their ridicule wrong. This shot shows us it isn't just about doing what's needed or being forced into a situation, it's about doing what he wants to do. It's not just business, it's personal. And as ever, a special thank you goes to Kestrel, Arwin, Stephen Legg, Janice McMahon, Samara Salsi, Sharikoff2814, Joshua C. Follier, Chad Bramwell and Incomplete Sentience. Thank you.